Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. This is the
Okay.
Urbana Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission. It's November 17th, 2020. Could we have a roll call?
Bill Brown,
Here.
Annie Adams, Shannon Baranek,
Here.
Kara Dudek,
Here.
Cynthia Hoyle,
Present.
Audrey Ishii,
Here.
Susan Jones,
Here.
Jeff Marino,
Here.
Sarthak Prasad,
Present.
Nancy Westcott,
Here.
and Annie, I didn't hear you at first, but I see that you're on the call.
Yes, I just joined. Yes, I'm
Okay.
here. Thank you.
Great, thanks. All right, and it looks like we have a few other attendees. Okay.
Yeah, we have Bob Nelson here from IDOT. Thanks for joining us. And Tim Cohen, our new interim public works director. Anyone else? Deborah Liu in attendance.
Lily Wilcock is here.
Oh yeah, and Lily.
I just sent the link to Girija.
Okay, and she's just on as an attendee. Should I make promote her to panelist? Will she be presenting something?
Yes, she has a
Okay.
presentation.
Okay, next we can approve the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Are there any additions or corrections?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Thank you. Moved by Audrey. Is there a second?
I'll second the agenda.
And seconded by Nancy. And we need to have a roll call.
Bill Brown,
Yes.
Annie Adams,
Yes.
Shannon Baranek,
Yes.
Kara Dudek,
Yes.
Cynthia Hoyle,
Yes.
Audrey Ishii,
Yes.
Susan Jones,
Yes.
Jeff Marino,
Yes.
Sarthak Prasad,
Present.
Nancy Westcott.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. Next, we need to approve the minutes. Did everybody get a chance to look over the minutes from October? Any corrections? Do we have a motion to approve them?
I move to approve the minutes.
Moved by Sue. Is there a second?
Sorry, I second that.
Seconded by Annie. Any discussion? If not, could we have a roll call?
Bill Brown,
Yes.
Annie Adams,
Yes.
Shannon Baranek,
Yes.
Kara Dudek,
Yes.
Cynthia Hoyle,
Yes.
Audrey Ishii,
Yes.
Susan Jones,
Yes.
Jeff Marino,
Yes.
Sarthak Prasad,
Yes.
Nancy Westcott.
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. Public input. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak? If so, raise your hand. Deborah. Should be able to unmute now.
Hey, Bill. Is it possible to let me share my screen so I can show a picture?
Okay. think you should be able to share now. Give it a try.
Awesome. Okay. Hey guys. So I'm Deborah. People who don't know me, I'm just a citizen, not officially affiliated in any way, but concerned about pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure here in town. I wanted to bring up a certain intersection to your guys' attention. So this is the intersection of Broadway and Park, as viewed from this location here at the intersection of Broadway and Park, right where the city recently completed the new pedestrian bicycle pathway. So I live right up here, sort of behind the shopping plaza. So I go through this intersection a ton. And the more I use it, the more concerned I am about it. So, I mean, this intersection has been brought up before, I think in a past BPAC meeting at some point, but any driver approaching this intersection. So for context, there's a stop sign here, and there's an inferred stop sign here for anybody coming out of the driveway, but there's no stop sign in the northbound, southbound direction. So any driver approaching this intersection has to watch out for traffic coming in 3 directions, as well as a pedestrian crosswalk here. So I have 2 concerns, right? One is that the driver has a lot to pay attention to. And as we all know, that's a recipe for a pedestrian or a vulnerable road user getting hit, or even just a vehicle collision. And the second concern I have is I don't understand why the MTD stop is right here on top of the crosswalk. So any driver approaching, you sort of have to judge in a split second if the person standing here is waiting for the bus or attempting to cross. And I've seen more than once a pedestrian standing here waiting to cross, starting to cross, and then the driver realizing, oh crap, this guy isn't waiting for the bus, he's trying to cross the street. And sort of, anyways, it's just a non-ideal interaction. So that's one question. And then the other question I had is, at one point, I think somebody talked about Park Street being turned into a one-way street. I think the Park District was talking about that as part of their improvements to Crystal Lake Park. Just wondering if that is true, if I remember that correctly. And if so, how can I encourage them to do it faster? Because I think it would do a lot to improve the usability of this intersection. It would just be one less thing that drivers have to watch out for. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks. Karen, do you want to address that? I know that they were talking about doing one way through the park on the drive. I hadn't heard about Park Street.
The Park District doesn't own Park Street, the city does.
Right.
Yeah, the one-way road system would be just on the interior Crystal Lake Park Road using the Park Street path and hopefully a future multi-use path along Broadway to create a loop, but it never interacts with the city roads because, like Cynthia said, we don't have any jurisdiction over that.
Yeah. Now I know that the intersection is bad, and especially at noon when you have lines coming out of Jimmy John's that snake out on Broadway.
Yeah, and actually lines coming out, like going into Jimmy John's, the drive-through line piles up into the street. And
Right.
then on top of that, you have cars trying to leave the intersection. So
Yeah, I would
it's just the dumpster.
definitely encourage you to take this to the Traffic Commission first. And I don't know if it's been there before, but that's really the place to start with. This is a major vehicle intersection that's got a lot of issues and could potentially involve reconfiguring some of the drive-up stuff at Jimmy John's, and I don't know about the bus stops and stuff, but there's a lot going on there. So probably the Traffic Commission, we could, if you or us, either one, we could get it on the agenda, then we could all participate in the Traffic Commission meeting too.
Okay, I'll shoot an email to Barb, I think. Is that Barb Steele who puts things on the agenda?
Who's the chair? Shannon, is it you or?
Barb is the organizer of everything, so it all goes through her first, so she makes sure everything's done by proper procedure.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
master of things.
Do that, Deb. That would be great.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. Thanks, Bill. That's a good suggestion.
Okay,
I
thanks.
can wager a educated guess on the bus stop. That particular location would allow those who are using mobility assistive devices to wait and access the bus without having to wait in the street. which is what happens on a lot of streets where there's not a good ramp for accessing the bus. So also there's, because there's a large paved area there, that gives them a staging area, a waiting area. And so I think probably, moving the bus stop is not going to be a good suggestion, but they could, I guess, look at the intersection in terms of whether stop signs would work. And actually, this is an intersection that a roundabout would be good at. I don't know how much right of way would be needed there to accomplish that, but it would certainly help solve some of the problems.
They did put in that the crosswalk, that is a new adaptation, but even a slow sign on the north-south street would be helpful, because it is very nerve-wracking to cross Broadway at that intersection.
Yeah, there will be the bike lanes that are on Broadway south of University will continue north once the University Avenue project is finished. So that may change it a little bit. At least it could encourage slower traffic, maybe.
Is that just northbound, Bill, or is there going to be a southbound one?
No, north and south, but I'm not sure how far it goes. I don't think it goes past the bridge. I'm not sure. Yeah, probably just, I don't remember.
I know a lot of
Yeah.
residents on Broadway have sent many letters and complained many times to the police and other people about how swiftly vehicular traffic moves down Broadway, up and down
Since
Broadway,
got rid of
and
the
that
bricks.
pets are being killed and children can't play in front yards anymore. And so I think, Deborah, there is that intersection, and there's, access to that. What would be great would be if people felt comfortable walking from Carl to pick up, a sandwich at Jimmy John's. But right now, I suspect most people are just like, I don't even want to deal with this on foot, And that's, again, our downtown is in the same situation. People just don't even want to deal with those intersections on foot. So, or on bike. But yeah, that would be
the other thing, the other sort of problem I have with this general area, since I live here, I'm kind of selfishly claiming everyone's time to talk about it, sorry. People who cut down Crystal Lake Drive, which is where I live, and then left on Broadway, they can skip 2 lights on University, and it saves them all of 2 minutes, but people are incentivized enough to do it to sort of gun down Crystal Lake Drive. And I actually asked the police to set up a speed trailer at one point. And they tracked an absurd number of vehicles. Shannon, I kind of sent you an email about this at some point, but it's like, it was thousands of vehicles. Let me see if I can find, anyways, it was an absurd number. And I think they set it out far enough down Crystal Lake Drive that they weren't catching any of the traffic coming in and out of the shopping plaza. So here we go. Nearly 2,000 vehicles, that's 1,724 vehicles go down Crystal Lake Drive every day. So they set it up for a few weeks and they caught an absurd number of vehicles. So anyways, it's a residential area and it's not treated like a residential area because cars use it like a freeway.
It's a lot of cut through. Okay, we do have quite a bit on the agenda tonight, so let's wrap this up and move on to the next item. Thanks for bringing that, though. I think we need to keep that on our radar. So first on the agenda is Tim Cohen and Shannon to talk a little bit about potentially changing our Zoom schedule for a little bit. And Tim just started as our interim public works director a few weeks ago. Do you want to introduce yourself, Tim?
Sure thing. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right, great. Tim Cowan, I'll just give you a little background on me just so you guys can know me a little bit. I've spent most of my career in the civil engineering world working with municipalities. I've spent time as a consultant on a couple different occasions. I owned and operated my own consulting firm for about 6 years, and I've also worked as a city engineer in Danville for a few years in my past career. Just some background that's more related to BPAC type stuff. stuff is when I was in Danville, I did serve as a member on the DATS board over there, the Danville Area Transportation Study, when they were beginning to look at some of their larger scale long-term planning for their bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So I've got a little bit of background in that, not probably a ton, but enough to be dangerous. And now I'm here and I'm excited about the opportunity.
Good, thanks. So what's this about wanting us to cut back our schedule?
So essentially what we're running into now is really just conflicting needs because there's so many different commissions and committees and boards and council meetings that they're starting. And it's really just, it's been a blanket request now to all commissions, committees, and boards and councils to just, pose the question of, can in the interim term to help try to mitigate conflicts and scheduling issues, is there an opportunity to move meetings to either not bi-monthly, but every other month in the interim, basically, or just even if you guys have other proposed solutions. Obviously nighttime is, an ideal time to meet for most people because during the day people are working. But, if there were another opportunity to maybe host meetings at different times that would mitigate those conflicts, really, it's just a request right now that we're posing to all commissions and committees. And if we feel like we can adequately handle what we're doing in these times, to either switch to bi-monthly to mitigate conflicts, or possibly altering schedules just to, prevent the multiple conflicts that we're running into now with the Zoom need.
Okay. Yeah, we do have some subcommittees that could probably try to work efficiently in the in-between times if we cancel a meeting now and then. Audrey?
Yeah, one thing I've suggested in the past is combining our meetings with the Traffic Commission, especially because, do I understand you, Tim, that it's better to have the meeting during the daytime hours as opposed to the evening?
Potentially.
Okay, the Traffic Commission is scheduled for 4 p.m., but they haven't met since February, even though they're supposed to meet on a monthly basis. So I'm thinking if we combined meetings, that might potentially work really well for everyone, at least on some occasions.
Sure, and we can definitely take that into account and discuss that with the other members of the Traffic Commission and just see how that's going to work for everybody. I think that's not a terrible idea because, I would assume there's some overlap between the two committees.
Yeah, especially with regards to our Vision Zero initiative, we absolutely need the cooperation and buy-in of the Traffic Commission, and it's also our only opportunity to join forces with the police department and other people that work, primarily or are available primarily daytime hours.
Yep.
So combining some meetings with the Traffic Commission might not be a bad idea. Something worth looking into, I think.
I will caution that Traffic Commission tends to be 1 hour from 4 to 5, so there's not really room for that to be a 2-3 hour long meeting.
I agree, except that it hasn't met in 9 months, which suggests there's 9 hours right there.
We also haven't had a city council member appointed to it for many of those months. We had Eric Jacobson, then he left, and then Julia Lout, and then she left. And since I'm the only engineer currently working on it, lining things up has been difficult. It's not that we didn't want to meet, we just didn't have either the people for the quorum or actually be able to get something done.
Yeah, I wonder if that would lighten the load on you then, because you're in both the BPAC and the Traffic Commission.
I still need to do the engineering behind the Traffic Commission stuff. So that's not going anywhere.
Okay, that's an interesting idea.
In addition to that, I guess, I'll certainly bring that up to administration and discuss that opportunity. I guess if that doesn't work for some reason or another, is there any consideration for altering the BPAC schedule either to every other month, or to a different time of day that would work for you guys.
Our agenda is usually full. I really think going to bi-monthly would not, our agenda is usually full for our monthly meetings. I think
Yeah, I mean,
sometimes we can trim things, but
we can skip a meeting now and then. We were thinking about maybe skipping December because it's going to be pretty Christmas anyway.
What do our bylaws state?
I think it
They say
says
we meet monthly.
monthly, does it say or as needed at least quarterly, something like that? I think there's a minimum quarterly.
I think it says monthly, and you
It's
guys have
monthly.
the ability to alter that with basically a special vote to, if you wanted to alter it in the interim.
I'm concerned about changing the time. We have a number of people who work during the daytime, so I'm not sure we can change it to a daytime meeting.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I have back-to-back meetings at my day job. We're all volunteers here on this commission, and I could meet before work. I mean, is one opportunity that might be, if I don't know if people would be up for that, but I could meet before work. But I tend to have back-to-back meetings at my job in Zoom. So I know it's a big ask, but it's once
Is
a month.
4 p.m. possible?
Hours.
Is it possible to sometimes leave work an hour early for a 4 p.m. meeting?
How many would that work for most people if we met at 4 on some? Well,
I could do that sometimes.
I think with Zoom, it makes it easier because you just then work, you log out of your day job and then you do this for 2 hours and then you go back to your work job for 2 hours.
Well, that's pretty bad evening time though. Cutting into dinner.
That's the reality.
I mean, it would have to be a 1 hour meeting, as Shannon pointed out. I think it would really need to be strictly enforced.
Nancy, did you want to say something?
This is especially a Zoom issue, or is this a kind of a personnel issue of people being spread too thin?
It's more of a Zoom issue. Basically just trying to having our staff manage all this stuff to essentially we've got, a limited number of accessibility and in the fashion of what we have to do to meet the Public Meetings Acts and things like that. We're kind of limited on what we have available to us at this time.
okay. Well, it sounds like there might be a possibility of meeting at 4.
Yeah, and I think if you guys are open to, I don't think that we have to cut out the monthly meetings, but if we had some buy-in to either combine that with Traffic Commission or try to stick to a shorter agenda or something, just to, I'm certainly open to, alternate considerations. It's something we're dealing with, that everybody's dealing with, and there's not a silver bullet that's going to solve everybody's problems.
Can you help me understand how Zoom meetings are more of a problem for staff than in-person meetings? I'm having trouble understanding how that creates more of a problem for staff time.
It's not a staff time issue. It's a Zoom issue.
Oh, you mean in terms of there are other groups that want to meet on Zoom at the same time we're here?
I mean, there's all kinds of things out there that they're dealing with. I mean, I couldn't tell you the number of commissions that the city operates that with the Public Meetings Act, they're running into this. It's, not independent of the Public Works Department, but the citywide, as well as city council and committee of the whole.
So it sounds like just shortening the meeting would be helpful. Is that right?
Potentially. I don't have I don't have a perfect answer for you. They've basically asked me to talk to our commissions about what we can do to limit the Zoom needs or mitigate ideas to help mitigate conflicts.
Here's an example of one of the conflicts. So like when we met in person, say school board needed to have UPTV at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, we can go to the executive conference room and have our meeting up there. When there's only one Zoom channel that Jason Liggett runs, you can't do both at the same time.
Yeah, I know there have been commission meetings going on up in the, before we all went to Zoom, we would sometimes have commission meetings going on upstairs when the council was meeting in the chambers. So there may be some overlap like that. And like tonight, yeah, Tuesday nights is usually school board. Well, for now, let's cancel December. Although
I think that we could go easily to like 8 meetings instead of 12, because I think we sometimes cancel them anyways. And we could just have the full agenda, but try to be more efficient with our time, if that makes sense. Like still do as much as we've been doing, but try to condense it a little bit.
And maybe push it, you know, like we said, 9 o'clock, we can maybe push that to 9:30.
Maybe. I mean, I love like all of the topics we talk about, but I feel like all of us are also kind of like zoomed out. So the thought of maybe having a slight break and then just working more efficiently is actually kind of appealing to me.
Well, and I think we need to understand the ask a little more clearly. It's not completely clear to me what the ask is, other than to reduce the number of meetings, and that doesn't really tell us very much about exactly what we're trying to accomplish. So I don't have a problem with canceling our meeting for December, and then maybe in January it'll be clearer what it is that they're asking for.
okay, well, let's try that. I think we would have to go ahead and meet at our regular time in January. No, I guess the chair could, if we need to, we could reschedule. The chair can reschedule. So let's plan on canceling December and try to get some clarification on January. And we'll communicate about potentially meeting earlier if that's the outcome.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, and welcome to Urbana.
Thanks.
Yeah, welcome.
I had
Thank
also hoped at some point, I know you're still getting settled in and everything. Part of our mission, BPAC, or one of our assignments basically is to make recommendations on capital improvement projects. And we haven't done that the last couple of years. We haven't had the opportunity to weigh in on that. And like recently, there were a couple of ITEP grants submitted that we didn't really get much input on. So just kind of prioritizing those things. So as you get settled in and start working on the capital improvement plan, keep us in mind and try to figure out a way to work us in maybe in January or February. Does that sound?
Sure. And I'm trying to get up to speed on all that myself, obviously. And I would certainly urge you guys, if you've got kind of like a priority list of things out there that you guys already have like in the queue, feel free to send that my way ahead of time so that I can, try to broach some of those subjects in the early planning stuff too. So we can say, hey, a lot of times it's going to make sense if we're doing a corridor improvement or a roadway improvement to try to pair that with things if they're on your list. Maybe they're not priority 1, but if it's priority 3 and it's priority 1 for the right of way, maybe we can pair those two together. So I would say if you guys do have kind of a general list out there, even if you got your top 10, if you send that my way, I can at least have them in my head to open those discussions.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, in the bicycle pedestrian plan, I think they both have some like 0 to 5 year and 5 to 10 year objectives. So we could kind of compile those. Those plans themselves are pretty big books. So maybe I could either me or somebody else on the committee, a volunteer, could kind of compile some of those for you.
Tim, one thing as you're meeting with all these people and talking with them is a lot of times we have no idea what other commissions are doing and what the crossover of their work is with our work. Like we don't know, like people want crosswalks, in front on like Main Street where all that new housing is coming up, to be able to walk to the co-op. Like we won't know that people want that to happen. And so it would be really, I think that's just one thing to think about. It's like, I feel like a lot of times these commissions meet and we all like talk, we're all like talking, we're not talking together. We're just kind of presenting ideas and they're not, all the information's not getting filtered into one thing. We're all kind of working at odds with each other. So like Audrey was saying, like meeting with the traffic commission, or, you know, maybe we're combined with another commission that is, you know, so we could actually even listen in on what their concerns are and what they're working through, because we actually don't interface with any of them. Like even, you know, none of the other commissions, but all these commissions are all related to each other. So that's my little moment there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, obviously I don't have my head wrapped around everything, but I certainly can understand that. And, you know, maybe that is another opportunity out there for, you know, if there are a few related commissions, that maybe they have a joint meeting once a year, even something, you know, I don't know what that looks like, but, you know, rather than take, you know, everybody, if we have 2 or 3 commissions that are really related and probably should talk once a year or something, put everybody in the same room and just have one big powwow of, you know, 3 commissions or whatever that may be.
And that would be easier with Zoom.
Right. And I think, you know, those type of things we can certainly try to address and work through. You know, I got to figure it all out still. But generally, you know, I can certainly appreciate that desire.
Yeah, because like even at the University of Illinois, we did WebCon once a year. And it was just this one time throughout the year that you actually met other people. You'd have side channel conversations, you know, communicators, you know, whatever we were all working on. And then you would attend presentations. So in some ways, that's more work. I know this is more work for, anyway, you get the concept of where I'm going with this, but it just seems like it would be great. I would love to know what the other commissions are working on, what they're presenting on, what they're talking about. And I think the other commissions would love to know what we're talking about and what we're presenting on. So if there's a way to make it all work better, instead of us all just talking to ourselves for 2 hours once a month, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, so I can certainly understand that. And I think there's value in that too, is, you know, having some crossover there.
Okay, thanks again. So on the next item on the agenda is the discussion of what we started last week on the prioritizing segments of local highways for bicycle improvements. And Bob Nelson has agreed to join us from IDOT. I don't know how much, I think I sent Lily like a 2-sentence summary or something that you may have seen, Bob, but do you want me to kind of review a little bit of what we talked about last week?
When you talked with me.
Yeah. So let me just go over a little bit what we talked about, as far as we were wondering how we could encourage IDOT or access or encourage funding sources for IDOT, or find out how to improve segments of rural highways that are heavily used because there's no other options for cyclists. In some cases, it's recreational cyclists. In other cases, it's even just commuting, like in the Mahomet area. There were 2 deaths this year in Champaign County in the Mahomet area, and another one up by Gifford, both of them on rural highways. That from looking at data, like through bicycle usage data from Strava or other things like that, you could almost predict those, because you could see that people were using those heavily in order to get around, in order to, or I can let me just share my screen and kind of go
Okay.
over a couple of the points. I think that's the whole screen. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay. So this is a Strava global heat map.
Yes, I've seen that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is actually where the doctor was killed in Muhammad on. This is one
Right.
right here.
Yes.
You can tell that cyclists are using that pretty heavily, because if you don't use, and here, this is still 150, but there's hardly any usage there. So it really drops off, and the speed limit picks up here. So from here on through Muhammad, it's a relatively low speed limit. It's pretty safe for cyclists. I forget what the shoulder may be a little bit wider in some of those areas, but definitely from the edge of town here on, there's no shoulder. I understand. I saw Bicycle Illinois actually, or Ride Illinois, did a release this week that said that the improvements planned for this stretch, this 6 mile stretch, have been upgraded a little bit from a 3-foot shoulder to a 4-foot shoulder with a rumble strip. So we're really thankful for that. But this area here, you know, is just one example of how you could use this kind of data, because normally somebody doing recreational ride, or even there's a big subdivision down here by the Forest Preserve property here. So even to get into town, they would either use that or they'd have to go clear around it at about 3 or 4 miles to their trip. And when we're doing recreational rides, we actually usually do that. We go clear around because we don't want to bother with that. But for somebody that's commuting to school or you know, just going into town to meet a friend or get something at the grocery store, they probably aren't going to go clear around, and that's why you do this heavy spot. Another place where somebody was killed on North 47, or yeah, that's 47, right? Was right up here, and he lived in this subdivision. This is a sidewalk here. You can tell that they're actually using the sidewalk here as much or more than 47 here to get to this point where they could get to a country road, basically. Or in this case, they would just, this is the main drive here. This is the sidewalk here. So the main comes out here and they would go south to get into town. Or if they're doing a recreational ride, they probably take the sidewalk here and then take that one or that one. But this is 47. I think that was fairly recently redone, but the shoulder was only, looked like 3 feet to me. I didn't go out and measure it. It didn't look like the 4-foot shoulder. So there's a couple spots like that. I think another one we talked about was on, it was on Route 10, or yeah, Route 10. This is Whiteheath here. So this is like if you're taking Route 10 Springfield Avenue out of Champaign going to Clinton Lake. But where after it crosses the Sangamon here, there's a stretch. This is a real nice area to ride on the west side of the Sangamon all along here from Mahomet on the way, all the way down to Allerton Park. But there's one stretch here where there's really no option. This is grass here. So the recreational riders have to get on 110. There's no shoulder here. There's garbage trucks coming back from Clinton landfill and zooming past here. There's actually a Strava segment there. I don't know if you've looked at Strava segments before, but people can name them what they want. Someone named this segment, IDOT build shoulders here. Sometimes there's segments like, you know, a hard uphill ride, or, you know, they make crazy names for these segments, but this is what this one's named. And it goes from 1 mile stretch. This is Sand Lake subdivision there. So there's also a subdivision there. There's probably kids that ride their bikes that would use any kind of side path that could be put along there. So we're just wondering about these short segments of rural highways. Instead of waiting, you know, for the 5 or 10 year plan for an upgrade and then hoping for a 3-foot shoulder to be put along a 10-mile stretch or something, are there any programs at IDOT or any potential programs or anything that we could help start that would address kind of funding for these short segments to improve the safety for recreational riders and for commuters on these areas?
Well, unfortunately, from what I've been told, looking at short segments like this, that they usually don't do it because just of the cost, the unit cost that it would take. And that's why they try to do it with whenever we have long segments, long projects, and especially in the rural areas. Now, like when you were showing 49 or 47 up there at Mahomet, okay, when we did that, that would have been before I learned about Strava having a heat map and being able to use that. But like on the US 150, where the doctor was hit, whenever that came up, I was able to go to that Strava map. I looked right at that, and then I talked to the engineers that were going to be working on that and told them what we had there, because Ed Marsati had sent me an email about it. And so we looked at that, and then that's where we were able to, since we have to put rumble strips in, then we want a 4-foot shoulder, so we got 3-foot clear zone from the rumble strip. So they're going to stripe the lanes at 11 foot and then have a 4-foot shoulder. But like the piece that you just showed near Whiteheath, unfortunately, when it comes to looking at those outlying rural areas, I'm looking at the warrants in our policy. But if you've got a problem area like that and it's used quite a bit by cyclists, then drop me an email and let me know about it so I can at least put that on file. And if we have an HSIP project that comes up doing just shoulder work, then we can look at that. Or I'll have a record of that there's a problem out there and then we need to address it.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, thanks.
Especially for 150 and the change in the design there.
Yeah.
We use it, even though our jurisdiction is Urbana, a lot of us use these roads.
I can imagine that, yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, I was travel around when I would cycle too. You start looking at the same thing every time.
Is that money counted as highway money, or is it count so I know when the new governor came in, he put some more money towards bike, walk, bus transportation. And so I love the idea, like you were saying, of let me just start building a catalog of where these short segments are, because there might maybe at some point be magical money that I can put into these short segments. But is that when you upgrade that, this is just pure curiosity, when you upgrade that, is it considered where's the money coming from? There, that's my question.
It'll vary.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there are several different pots of money and programs, and it gets fairly complicated. Some of it's passed through from the Fed.
Yeah. Usually whenever when we have when we start looking at the programming of roadways, then one of the first things I do is needs assessment, and then I'll provide input to that. And if there's a problem area out there, unfortunately, I'm not going to know about it if it's in your area, being in Paris, unless I'm getting emails or something, let me know about them. And I certainly have that they're going to listen to me when I said there's a cycling problem.
Does the state of Illinois have do they have paid access to special Strava data that we don't see, as far as bicycle?
I just found out from Ed Barsotti that Strava's offering their data for free. And I went ahead and applied just last week or the week before. I went to Strava and applied to try to get data for the whole district. So I've got, because one of the things that's hard to explain to somebody that doesn't cycle, when you show them that heat map, they'll say, well, how many people did that? How much data do you have there? How many people went there to make it? It looks like it's traveled pretty heavily. And I think I read on Strava's website that they keep a rolling of the last 3 months or something like that. So it's fairly recent. But
yeah, one of the nice things about making a segment like that is they make those segments so that they can compete against each other, and then the program keeps a list of everybody who's ridden that segment and their time and everything. And that IDOT segment had hundreds of unique users over the past few years. I don't know how far it went back, I think 3 years or so, but there were several hundred unique users. And I know for a fact that some people that live in Mahomet ride that stretch, weekly. So if you add up the actual trips, it would be interesting to see how many hundreds or thousands of trips there are per year on that segment by bike, but it's pretty high.
Yeah. And Ed Barsotti has sent letters to the district, and we go through them and we check it out, and we've talked to him about different areas. So
yeah, so Champaign County Bikes ought to be taking a look at that and then providing input back to you, Bob. I think that since that's a countywide organization, that would make sense for them to do that.
Okay. And I think I've got them on whenever I go through the bicycle travel assessment, then I can mark off local organizations, so they can have an opportunity to see the BTA. And I think that would be really good, because I like providing those bicycle travel assessments to the locals, because then that gives you the opportunity to say, hey, we've got a problem in this one area that you're missing completely.
Prairie Cycle Club would be a good one too, because those are people who are mostly focused on going on long distance rides.
Yeah.
It's what's interesting about this discussion to me is when we're dealing with just the city of Urbana, right? It's about connectivity. Like we need to build, we need to get a little half-mile segment here so people will connect these other 2-mile segments. And it never occurred to me to think of rural roads in that same manner, because I personally am too free. Like I'll bike on rural roads every now and then, but generally I find them such a patchwork that I'm not comfortable on it. So it's just an interesting concept.
Yeah. I was just reviewing the ITEP application for Baker Street. Well, that's awesome. I mean, being able to connect Main Street and Washington Street right there by the school, I thought that was a great idea. Yeah.
We would be thrilled. So I know there's a lot of competition.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, do you have any questions for us? Thanks a lot for joining us.
No, I just want to emphasize it. I think, did you see my email address? I typed it in whenever I signed on. Feel free to email me if you've got a segment like the ones you showed me. You know, make up a quick map, send me an email, and I'll have those on file. You know, and I'll be sure to. I'm in the programming section, so I can get to the programming engineer and let her know what's going on. So. Definitely, okay, we definitely want to know about those areas.
Wonderful.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is Vision Zero update for Cynthia. And I know you guys sent some slides.
Yes, we've got a
chance
student
to
here, and I was going to kick off our presentation by sharing a video. We had the International World Day of Remembrance on Sunday in Urbana. And thank you, Bill, for attending. And we had to very, very quickly move it from a in-person event to a virtual event. We began that process on Friday, and I have to say I'm really rather impressed with the group of people who pulled that off, because I think we put together a really nice event and shared stories from victims, and it was quite powerful. So I was going to kick off part of our conversation here with the goals that and the information that has been provided through the World Health Organization, and that Vision Zero is part of the effort to reduce deaths on our roadways. And then we can turn it over to Garisha. If I goobered up her name again, she's a graduate student in microbiology, and we applied through the Community Learning Lab, and she expressed interest in our project. And Audrey and I have been working with her, and she has really done a spectacular job in helping us begin moving forward with our project. But I was going to kick that off with a video, and so if I have the ability to do screen share, I will show that, and then we can hand it off to her for her presentation, if that's okay. So do I have this? Can you all see my screen, or do I need to do something else here, Bill?
Not yet. Sometimes it takes a minute. Are you sharing?
Let me go look. Yes. Do I have to accept sharing, or?
Is there a green button at the bottom of your screen that says share screen?
I just need to do share screen.
Yeah, yeah.
That would be a straightforward option, wouldn't it?
It confuses me frequently, honestly.
Here we go. Now it's working. Okay.
Okay, now we see it.
All right, now.
Flashbacks to driver's ed videos.
So do we have a motion to adjourn?
All right. Cannot get to my stop share. Do you have a share screen option, Eurisha, in your, are you able?
Hi, yes.
All right. I will let you take it away from here then.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, yes, so taking up from the video before, it talked about taking action to save lives, and that's what Vision Zero is about. It's a data-driven collaborative effort to eliminate traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all. And so the traditional approach towards this has been that traffic deaths are inevitable, and that's because we feel like we cannot prevent collisions from happening. And it's because we cannot account for perfect behavior of people. But what Vision Zero's effort says that we can actually prevent traffic deaths if we take into account that humans can fail, and if we take into account these possibilities and do a systems based approach instead of saying that the individual is responsible for walking safely and following rules, if we design our systems in a way that we can prevent fatal crashes, then we can prevent traffic deaths from happening. And so this initiative was started in Sweden, and this graph is about traffic deaths in US and Sweden. So after the start of this initiative, we can see a decreasing trend in traffic deaths in Sweden. And US also has a decreasing trend, but the numbers are really high. And it's among the top countries for fatalities per 100K population. And this is just some statistics to show that if we have some controls like slowing down speeds, we can save lives. So if a driver is driving at 20 miles per hour, 1 out of 10 people can die. But if it's at 40 miles, the cars are at 40 miles per hour, then 9 out of 10 people die. And to link this to Urbana, in Urbana, we also see a slow increasing trend of crashes and fatalities. And if we try to look at pedestrians and bicyclists, so these are crashes by mode. So only 3.3% crashes involve pedestrians, but 60% of fatalities were for pedestrians. And similarly for bikes, just about 3% crashes were involving bikes, and then there are 10% of fatalities. So bicyclists and pedestrians are disproportionately affected. And even for injuries, if we look at type A injuries, so this is 2018 data, and there were total 16 injuries for bicyclists and pedestrians. And even among pedestrians and bicyclists, the pedestrian deaths were much higher. Pedestrian injuries were much higher. So 13 for pedestrians and 3 for bicyclists. And we can say that, well, maybe they were looking at their phone or walking. Maybe they were irresponsible. So if we look at percentage of crashes by prior action, which means what they were doing before the crash happened. This is for pedestrians. So 25% of them were crossing with signal, which probably means that the fault was not by the pedestrian. And even for bicyclists, 16% were crossing with signal, 19% were crossing with traffic. So 37% of them were following the rules, and still there was a crash. And so that's why Vision Zero. This is a map that shows the Vision Zero cities in the US. So there are more than 30 cities right now who have committed to this resolution. And even the mayor has approved Vision Zero resolution. And so the goal of Vision Zero is to come up with an action plan. So this action plan would include a review of previous road safety efforts and an analysis of data to identify trends and issues so we can come up with better ways. It would include consultations with the BPAC and other county agencies so that we can map high risk zones and then communicate this with the community to make sure that people are aware of the high risk zones and they can be careful around them. So it would include 3 parts. So those are education, which can be done through stickers, newsletters, social media. We can have surveys, we can partner with schools. Then comes engineering, which would mean that our design should prioritize safety. There should be audits to make sure that road safety rules are followed. It should include promotion of crash avoidance technologies, which are coming up in cars and vehicles to avoid crashes. And then policies and laws. So we should be able to manage traffic safety by aligning our policies and keeping Vision Zero goals in mind. And this is just a timeline about our action plan. So right now we are in November and we can have a communication strategy by February. So would we want to have a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan, or a 10-year plan? And then by April, the communication strategy can be started and the task force can kick off. By June, we can have a draft plan. And then October and September, October, there would be community engagement. And next January, we can have the final action plan. And so, yeah, so traffic fatality levels are right now are unacceptable. And we can take this data-driven based Vision Zero approach to create a difference.
Thank you. Would you go back to the previous slide for me there?
Yeah, sorry.
And then I was hoping too, while I talk about that for just a minute, if you would pull up the flyer that you made as well, so we could just show that to everybody, if you have that handy. So yeah. I just wanted to sort of expand and clarify on the proposed schedule. We wanted to run this by you all tonight, because what we have done is enter an application for a communications class in the spring semester at the U of I to take on our project and help us develop a communication strategy. So that's what that first step is, because the semester isn't going to really start, we won't get going with them till February next spring, and get them to help us work on this communication strategy, pull one together, figure out how our task force is going to work, and kick that off in April. So hopefully between February and April, we would have something from working with the class that we could operationalize to get started with working on our plan. And then, it's possible that we could also enlist the aid of a student to help us with our draft plan, or we may be able to find grant funding that we can apply for that would allow us to hire some help with doing that. So there are a number of ifs involved in this, but this is a draft schedule for us. And if the commission feels comfortable with our attempting to achieve this, then we can continue working to operationalize it next year and get our plan rolling. So I'll stop talking unless Audrey has anything she wants to add.
No, that sounds good, Cynthia. I think I just think it's important to get the momentum going. To try at one of the items to being a Vision Zero city is to have a commitment to have an action plan, a strategy. So It would be, I think it doesn't have to be within a year. I don't believe they have a strict time frame. I think it could be longer, but I think we all feel that the situation is really at a crisis level right now. We've seen far too many pet and bike deaths during this pandemic for, you know, whatever reason. I think the momentum is there right now.
Yeah, and part of that initial strategy, that communication strategy, is to help the public understand what we're talking about. And so we have a flyer that we can share with you, and so we can post that and share that with the public. If you all feel comfortable with this, we can certainly send it out to everybody. And so it has some of that same information that was in the presentation, only on a 2-page flyer. And we're happy to have input and feedback from you all, so we can send this out and you all can send us back suggestions.
I had a question about the community input section. So will you mostly be sort of creating things behind the scenes, and then the community engagement is gathering feedback on that, or will you be asking up front for stories and buy-in and values? How do you foresee like asking people for their input?
Well, I think we should probably do both, and I would think part of the communication strategy would be to get input from people, to ask them to tell us what they perceive the problem being, and to have some surveys and other ways in which we can engage people and get feedback was as I envisioned a communication strategy.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Part of the timeline was kind of built around what we know is a public event in May when we have Bike to Work Day. And that we were kind of having an eye to maybe that being a good date to kick off with the mayor's resolution and a mass media blitz and get the public engagement at that point. So this flyer that Girija created is a first draft at what we would hand out to explain in simple terms. You've seen the millions of, Vision Zero network 9-step plans and so on, and the massive statistics, but we're looking at something that people can understand on a really simple and quick level without having to get a degree in it. So yeah, definitely we're thinking that the public engagement would start right with that. The communications work with the class that Cynthia's working with is to develop that plan, that social, that outreach, that social media, and how do we get the people active and engaged. But then starting in April or May, we really make it operational and start getting public input at that time. So then the second one in September, October, at that point, we're supposed to have a draft plan, and it's specific, here's an action plan, taking into account what people have told us starting in the spring. So it's ambitious. I would say it's ambitious, and probably difficult to do if we're only meeting every other month. So I'm not sure. We might have to, have more meetings during the summer, spring and summer.
Cynthia, I would be willing to meet with the class and talk to them, because I've collected a lot of other Vision Zero, the way other people have talked about Vision Zero, presented Vision Zero visually, and like videos, and think about it in an advertising way and stuff. So just letting you know.
Sure, absolutely. And we're happy to have your feedback on the flyer too. Girija's working on a degree in microbiology, so I'm rather impressed with her ability in graphics under the circumstances. She grasped this concept and grabbed all the data. We gave her all the data for crashes in that we had from the Regional Planning Commission, and she crunched all that data and came up with the graphics and put this together. So we were awfully pleased with the work that she did for us, and the fact that she found it interesting enough to do it for us. So
Yeah,
So
I think it was particularly good to have someone who's not majoring in that to help give us
that's
an.
probably true.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
part of the communications development that will be taking information about Vision Zero and putting it into kind of questionnaires for people and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And we need to think too about how we reach people with a variety of disabilities, because that's a really important population for this. And so we probably should make a special effort to reach out to the organizations locally and ask them to give us some feedback on the best way to get input from that community.
And I think it's important to note that this is interactive. I mean, we're not going at this as a blank slate by any means. We have a ton of information, as Garija just showed, about the effect of even a few miles of speed difference.
Mm-hmm.
What that affects. So we present that to the public, and given that, what would they see happening?
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is not just a blank slate thing. It is right from the get-go. It's part of an educational effort.
Right. Right. So I guess by the lack of questions and commentary, the group's reasonably comfortable with our proceeding with this schedule. Okay, I see a lot of nodding
I think
heads.
I am. I mean, it seems like it's general enough so that you have a target date almost every month. So if you're, or every other month anyway. So if you're not going to make it, you can push it back a little bit and re-stress. But it seems like it's nice to have, you know, a couple of months time to kind of force you to get in gear and get that part done. It seems like a good schedule to me. I don't know how, you know, realistic it is, but we'll see. But it seems like a good way to start.
Yeah, we'll have to work with the city to see how we handle the engagement, because, for example, if we want to have down here be a part of the change or take a survey or whatever, you know, I will want to somehow share that through the city's website, not necessarily to post those on the website, but to have it linked there. So we have to talk with the people who manage IT at the city about how to do that, or maybe talk with Gabe about how they manage that when they do plans for the city, because they don't use the city's website to post all of that. I think they use their own and then provide links through the city, if I understand how it works correctly.
Well, I think we really would like to have the kickoff of Vision Zero, the resolution and all of that in place before Bill leaves office. When is that, Bill?
May 1st, I think.
Oh, really? It's that, so it's before the.
So it'll be your grand exit. Your grand send-off.
So, and then the task force recruitment, would that be occurring like early summer, late spring, something like that? Or would that?
Well, I think we would want to start talking to people early spring. So I think we could start talking with people in March and get some agreement from various groups and organizations in the city. I think we'd want to try and have that group ready to roll certainly by May 1st.
Okay.
We know that the task force does need to include certain key personnel. So we do need to probably have Mayor Marlin already have issued an invite to at least those key people, the police department, the health department, and obviously Public Works.
Yeah, hopefully by April or May, the health department won't be quite as busy right now. They probably don't.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah, it's really hard right now. Yeah, I think in those meetings we'll probably have to be during the daytime, because in order to get some of the staff there, you really need them to be daytime meetings, because these are usually part of their job to be involved with these meetings.
We also had, recall, intended that people from other agencies, RPC,
Right.
the U of I. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And public health and schools.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, any other questions? So you're going to, you've either sent this flyer around or you're going to, and we can submit comments back. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can send you the presentation and the flyer, and then I'll hopefully hear something about the class. I don't know what the timeline is. I guess I could ask.
Hey, Bill, should we do a motion that directs something? I'm not sure what the motion would be, to continue to move forward with taking the initial steps to initiate an action plan for Vision Zero on behalf of so that way, you know, we have a formal.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea.
Okay. Well, then I guess I'll make a motion that we direct the Vision Zero subcommittee to continue to put together, you know, work with the communication. That motion's getting a little long. Maybe I need to reword that. But, you know, work with the University of Illinois class to put together a communication plan and take the initial steps towards a Vision Zero action plan. Did anybody write that down? I guess I could have written it down and wordsmithed it.
Shelby, did you get that, or want us to try to restate it?
I didn't catch all of it, but I can always refer back to the call like I usually do. So we should be okay.
Okay, I'll try to restate it. So there's been a motion by Jeff Marino for the Zero subcommittee to work with the U of I class to continue to develop a communication strategy and move forward with the Urbana Action Plan schedule. Is that close enough?
Yeah, the Vision Zero action plan.
Yeah.
Vision Zero action plan, yeah.
I'll second the motion.
There's a second. Who is that? Is that Sue?
Yeah, Sue seconded.
Okay.
Okay. Bill Brown,
Yes.
Annie Adams,
Yes.
Shannon Brannock,
Yes.
Kira Dudek,
Yes.
Cynthia Hoyle,
Yes.
Audrey Ishii,
Yes.
Sue Jones,
Yes.
Sarthak Prasad,
Yes.
Jeff Marino,
Yes.
Nancy Westcott.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay, that motion carries. Thank you. Thanks for the good work, and thank you, Risha. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me join.
You're welcome anytime. Okay, so the last thing on our business agenda is pedestrian streets, and Cynthia was going to do that too.
Yes, so I will pull up my presentation here, and there was discussion, there's been conversation in the community about changing some of our streets because so many more people are out walking and biking, and we do have streets without sidewalks, etc. And so I think it's been a little bit confusing about, there are all these different ideas and types. And so I thought I would just share a presentation that gives a little more information. And since I was just looking at all of this data, you know, I went through and pulled this data from the World Health Organization website. And, you know, unfortunately, we aren't that unusual in that the percentage of roadway deaths that are pedestrians and cyclists and motorcyclists is really high. and that it's the leading cause of death for children and young adults, and that traffic crashes have become everyday occurrences, but they are both predictable and preventable, and we know how to do something about it. And so these are ideas that we can take a look at. Oh, and I also was sharing a little bit of data from the Centers for Disease Control. This was a very nice graphic that they offered about, that we kill over 100 people every day in motor vehicle crashes in the USA. And then this graphic shows, how many people are hospitalized and treated and released. So it's more than just the people who are killed. And in our victim statements on Sunday, the people who talked about what it did to their lives and how difficult it was. So that's a very high cost in our community. So how do we do this? How do we make our streets safer for everyone, 8 to 80? And so I'm going to run through and talk about the various different ways in which communities are doing this, talk about slow streets and play streets and open streets and shared streets and neighborhood greenways and bicycle boulevards. And one of the things that you will note as we go through this is that, like, slow streets and play streets and open streets are temporary closures, but shared streets and neighborhood greenways and bicycle boulevards are when you take that to the next level and make it a more permanent change. So for slow streets, and a lot of this information I got from the National Association of City Transportation Officials, because they have such great graphics and they're really good about how they organize and lay out their information. And so slow streets are temporary closures, and it's the idea is to reduce traffic volume and speed so that people can walk and bike and do other things in the street safely. And they mostly would do this on streets that have low vehicle volumes and lower speeds, and that also there's a way for people to bypass them as a redundant street. And so, it shows here that you put up barriers to say local traffic only and lower speeds, and then has some other ground markings that just help alert people, traffic cones, things like that, to help them notify it. And so this just talks about that a little bit more, how you do it and brand it. Different communities brand it different way. Usually it works better in neighborhoods with a grid of entry points. And so you have to go through and take a look at that and how you're going to route traffic, and identify people to help take care of and monitor the barriers. This was part of the discussion in terms of city staff don't have time to do this. So it really has to be a community or neighborhood project, and that it still allows access. You can still have vehicles there, but the idea is that people are going slow and they know that priority has been given to the other roadway users who are not driving motorized vehicles. Then they have this, and I'm not going to read all of this to you, but you can take a look at it on their website. And you have to take a look at the network, identify the routes, make sure that there are other ways people can get around. You've got to work with the homeowners in the area, whether it's a homeowners association or a neighborhood association, and have other key stakeholders involved so that you have buy-in to do this. And when you close an intersection, you really have to make sure that there are ways around it. And the other thing that they recommend, which I think would be really good, is to monitor it and see what's the change in demand. How do you end up with a lot more bicyclists or pedestrians? To sort of do the evaluation part of it to see what kind of a difference it makes and who's using the roadway and how. And this is a picture of one, and this is a commercial street that they've done a slow street project on, and you can see they've done these pavement markings, which are a nice addition to the community and help slow drivers down. This, I think, has been particularly popular in larger cities with high densities of population, and you simply cannot walk on sidewalks and social distance properly. So Play Streets is another temporary closure option, but the way in which you do a play street is really to set it up for recreation for children. And I'll talk about this a little bit more as we go along, but you really don't want local traffic on the roadways because of having so many children out there. So you work with organizations to identify particular segments of the roadway that you want to close and what kinds of time periods to create new outdoor play spaces. And in Chicago, the Department of Public Health really worked on this over the summer. There were 2 community-based organizations that provided leadership, and they targeted a variety of communities. There are some places where it's more problematic than others in terms of access to parks and ability to get to parks. And so over the summer in Chicago, they had 150 Play Street activations, and it involved more than 24 community-based organizations. So it was very successful in Chicago this last summer. And so Play Streets, typically they look at parkways or waterfront corridors with few intersections. We don't have a waterfront corridor here, but we have lots of low volume residential streets. They looked at commercial streets too, where they have a lot of local restaurants and retail clustered, but you have to do that on a street with no transit. They specified about that, which is something that we have to look at in Champaign and Urbana. So in this case, you would install those temporary traffic barriers, and you would say emergency and delivery only, and you would want to make sure you establish a grid of entry points to local streets. But make sure that people understand that this is an area where children are playing. And so this is another one of those graphics that they offer from NACTO that show you what it would look like. And you'd actually use the street for playing in. So you really don't want vehicular access except for those absolutely necessary. And to brand it and to have those entry point signs clarify what's happening. So it would take a bit of public outreach and branding to make sure people understand. Same thing here. It's unlike slow streets, on-street vehicular parking should be disallowed. So there are differences in how you do it. And they're recommending too here that you use things like neighborhood greenways or bike boulevards to do this, because they're already low volume streets and they've already had a change. So you have to work again with all of the affected people who live there, the businesses, the stakeholders, the residents, and go through all of the same steps. And they once again recommend that we take a look at doing some data collection and conducting surveys, and that's something you could get your community partner organizations to assist with. And here's a picture of one. You can see the kids are really enjoying that opportunity. I've seen a number of pictures and videos out of places like New York where the people have just thronged to the streets with joy because they were locked up for so long. And then Open Streets is a program that we've attempted here, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but it's a temporary closure, and it closes streets to cars. And Gil Penalosa, who's the executive director and helped pioneer this in Central America, has this quote here that people traffic replaces car traffic, and the streets become paved parks where people of all ages, abilities, and social, economic, or ethnic backgrounds can come out and improve their mental, physical, and emotional health. And the idea behind these is it's about creating community, promoting local businesses, getting people to engage. And some places they do them regularly. In Columbia, where he was from, they did it every Sunday for a very long stretch of some major arterials, and it's an enormously popular event. So the benefits of this are that it does all of these things, and it really is good for local businesses if you do it right. Some places, the local businesses have seen enormous increase in business as a result of it. These are pictures from one that I had the rare privilege of attending in Los Angeles, Ciclavia, and they closed the downtown streets and ran this for miles. And there were literally 100,000 people out, and you can see how much people loved this event. And I was invited by this lovely lady. I had just done a bike tour that they were helping conduct, and they invited me to come along. They really are a lot of fun, and something that brands a community as well. So this is from a flyer that we did back when we had a coalition of people really working here to try and do an open streets event. And so we've talked about this again a little bit, that perhaps maybe what we should do is an open street event to celebrate MCOR when it's done next year. And I think that there would be a lot of enthusiasm for doing that, to show off the great work that we've done in this community and how nice and how much safer Green Street is going to be. And we might even be able to include doing it on a Sunday, for example, when you've already got low transit usage going on. But it is a major transit route, so closing that street is a major deal for the transit district. Then last, and that's the last one of these sort of temporary closures. And the next talk about shared streets. And these are primarily low volume residential streets that have narrow or non-existent sidewalks. And it gives people space to share in the roadway with drivers. And down at the bottom it says, depending on the street's volume and role in the traffic network, these streets have the potential to be redesigned as shared streets. So one of the things with the temporary closures is that sometimes those you can use them as pilot studies to see, would this be an option for a shared street or a neighborhood greenway? So these can be, I guess, interconnected activities to gather data and look at improvements and changes down the road. So this shows you, for example, a neighborhood street that was changed into a shared street, and it just narrowed the roadway. There's still parking on this street. They've taken the opportunity, I'm going to talk a little bit more about using it for improving stormwater management and improving sidewalks. And you can tell that they had money that they spent to actually change and upgrade the infrastructure for this particular one. This is a diagram from the Global Designing Cities Initiative. You can tell this one was out of Europe because they've got kilometers and meters in here. But this is what a street before. There was quite a bit of activity on the street. And then this is what it looked like afterwards. And oftentimes on shared streets, one of the things that they will do, and they've done this in Chicago on one location, is they'll remove the curbs. And so the entire space is shared by all of the users. I don't know that we want to do a shared street with that particular design here, but that is one of the designs that is often used to develop a shared street. But so you really have to take a close look and do a lot of special work on stormwater management, because without curbs, if you don't do it right, you can end up with water flowing into people's homes or businesses from the street. And then neighborhood greenways and bike boulevards. The reason why there are two names here is because they met with resistance in some communities when they called them bicycle boulevards, because community members perceive that as being something special done just for bikes. And so I believe in Portland, they rebranded it and they call it a neighborhood greenway, because it does more than just provide space for bicycles. It's creating roads and boulevards that are calmer and have slower speeds and are safer for people to walk and bike along. So you start with streets that are low in terms of traffic volumes and speeds, and you use pavement markings and signs and speed and volume management measures to discourage through trips to do that. And so this is from Seattle. They have a whole document on how to do neighborhood greenways and bicycle boulevards. And, the things that they were striving for, their goals here were to improve safety, to help people cross busy streets. That's a major thing with these. So for example, if we use Main Street in Urbana for a bicycle boulevard, we still have to get people across Lincoln. And as you all may recall, Craig had talked about how we could change the intersection at Lincoln to make it safer. And I've been in some of those intersections. I have pictures of them from other communities, and they do work. And to discourage cars from using those as through streets. And often the neighborhood is very enthusiastic about this because they want to protect the character of their neighborhoods. So you do things to help keep the speed low and to help people get to the places they want to go. Here it would be the campus, our parks, schools, our downtown, get to shops downtown from campus, things like that. And so this is what I was talking about in terms of this presents an opportunity to integrate stormwater treatment facilities and street trees and public gathering spaces as a way to impact traffic speed and volume. So you would look at things like widening sidewalks, putting in landscaping, traffic calming, etc. You can start doing this sort of a design with paint and then make it more permanent. In Chicago, they've done this in a number of locations. And so this is from NACTO. It kind of shows you the ideas for how you could do these sorts of things and improve the safety of the street. So for example, this is called a diagonal diverter. So in some places, keep people from using a street for cut through traffic. You make it so that they can't go straight, they have to turn, but bicycles and pedestrians can continue to go straight through. And then things like curb extensions, you still have stormwater management and parking here, but it's a way to narrow the lane and reduce speeds. So there's a whole book, a design book of traffic calming measures and devices that can be used, and they really have to be evaluated. It's very context specific. It very much depends on the location, the neighborhood, the traffic flow, the volume, etc. There are a lot of things that have to be taken into account in order to successfully implement this sort of a project. So I'm going to stop there, and I can answer questions if I am able. And let me get back to Zoom here.
Okay, questions for Cynthia. I should say that we had a few people that were going to try to meet with the mayor and the administrator over the past month about potentially creating a temporary open street or pedestrian street on a trial basis. And the way things are right now in the city, there's just zero staff time available for basically anything new. So the mayor was a little reluctant to entertain that at this point. And with the winter coming up, it probably makes sense to wait a little while and try again in the spring. And I think we do need to kind of work on what it is we're asking for a little bit more. Some people had approached them talking about play streets, and it's a little, they were getting a little bit different information from different people, and they were saying, well, what's wrong with the park? And so I think we need to think this through a little bit more and maybe not propose a specific street just yet. But
yeah, I think that's true. But in terms of what's wrong with parks, there's nothing. We have great parks locally, but you have to be able to get there. And in some places that's not easy. My street doesn't have any sidewalks. There are a number of streets in this community who do not have any sidewalks. People are already using the streets to walk and bike in. And in some places that's safe, and in other places it's not as safe. And so are there ways in which we can do low cost things that would help that? And I understand right now we do have a limitation in terms of staff time to study this. But I think it might be worth considering asking the resident task force to take a look at it. When Laurel was mayor, she put together a resident task force to take a look at snow removal, and they came up with recommendations. And I think that a similar process would work quite well here. A group of people could get together and take a look at the different requests that we've gotten and the issues and the problems that people have identified, and then come up with some suggestions for ways in which we might proceed forward. We certainly need a process, and we need to have some standards and everything in place. You can't just do it in a way that will create chaos. It has to be coordinated and done well. So those are my thoughts on that. I think that I don't see a reason why we couldn't ask a group of people to take a look at this and study it and come back with some more information for us to take a look at.
Yeah, I think as long as it didn't involve like mayoral appointments to a task force that would make it subject to the Open Meetings Act and have to have, Zoom meetings and staff support and everything. Deborah, did you want to comment?
I didn't know if I was allowed to talk.
Well, we're pretty informal here. Go ahead. Nobody else has their hand up.
I just wanted to point out, Cynthia, great presentation. There's a number of cities that have modeled slow streets, right? Chicago is one of them. And I think one city that did it particularly well and did it very, very swiftly was Oakland, California. And they literally identified 74 miles of streets that were good, that were good candidates for this. And they literally just plopped down signs that said no through traffic. And it was humongously successful, right? Like, I can't imagine very much staff time went into that. You look at a map and you can, if you know anything at all about Urbana or its neighborhoods, you can sort of identify which streets are good candidates. And you just got to plop down some signs that say no through traffic. No, it's negligible infrastructure cost. There's no infrastructure. If it turns out, a particular street is a dumpster fire, then they can just remove the sign. And it's not, and the residents love it. Now, we're not Oakland. Notably, we don't have California's weather. But it's not, it doesn't have to be this long, complicated thing that requires tons of engineering or tons of like careful thought, just do it. And then you can let people reclaim the streets for themselves and for their kids, not for 2-ton vehicles traveling at, on my street, 60 miles an hour.
Yeah, Oakland has done I did a bike tour there 3 years ago this spring. The way in which they've used graphics and art and engaged communities and neighborhoods, and it was really quite remarkable how something as simple as allowing a neighborhood to paint a mural in an intersection that was oversized really changed the feeling of the neighborhood. And I think Fairlawn to the east of Anderson is a perfect location for looking at something like that. And there are grants available to help buy the supplies. I think that there's an opportunity for Urbana to show some leadership here and to be progressive and to do something that really makes us stand out as a community that embraces making it livable and using art and engaging the community and the neighborhoods. We know we've got some neighborhoods where there are serious issues with safety, and wouldn't this be a great way to help them reclaim their neighborhood streets and take possession, kind of like the community garden did over in the Lehrman neighborhood. Man, when somebody stole the hat off of the scarecrow at the community garden, it was a big deal, and the neighborhood was outraged that someone would mess with their scarecrow. So having people take ownership of the streets instead of having them just be the city's problem that I'm going to blow my leaves into, I think it really changes the dynamic for a neighborhood and enhances the quality of life for everyone. So I would like for us to be less defensive about thinking about ways in which we can approach this and think about ways in which we can enable residents to do something that would really be a benefit to everybody.
Audrey? You're muted.
We can't hear you, Audrey.
The shared streets concept is something that we put into effect every time it snows, basically. Pedestrians are in the streets, and I would hope that pedestrians have right of way. We haven't really tested that yet. As far as I know, a ped hasn't been hit in the street during snow when they didn't have any other. I've always found people are very, very considerate. I mean, speed just automatically slows down, and thankfully, as you know, especially if it's an early snow, people misjudge what kind of control they have of their vehicle.
About 6 years ago, Audrey, there was a pedestrian hit and killed in Champaign. He had been to a party and he felt like he shouldn't drive because he'd been drinking, and he was walking home and he was hit and killed. So there have been
walking in the
incidents.
street because of snow?
Yes.
Or
yes, we haven't had snow in several years, as we all know, but this was one of the years that we did have a lot of snow, and so we have had people hit. It's just that we haven't had much snow lately. Our winters have been pretty snow free.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely essential that peds have right of way when it snows. I've been reluctant to start a big campaign to make that official because, as far as I've seen, there has not ever been a problem. You know, people have seemed to me to be very considerate. But I take the street, and I think a lot of people do, and the street is simply much more passable. Even if the sidewalk is shoveled, the street stays passable because of the vehicles, you know, creating slush rather than ice on the street. So it's kind of an automatic shared street, which could be, you know, used as a jumping off point to try it in a different season. But it's certainly one that I've sometimes thought maybe should be made official, but I hate to add rules if they aren't necessary. But on the, you know, in the way that people have been driving during this pandemic, you do wonder if maybe this is the year that it's necessary. There's been an incredible impatience, I think we've all observed on the roads. The streets are relatively empty of cars, and cars seem to be taking that as an invitation to move faster despite the people.
You know, Audrey, I think it could just be people are stressed out and they got a lot on their minds, to be honest with you. The more I think about it, I think that's why people are driving poorly, is they've just got a lot on their minds. And we did have a slowed street network where there was a giant sign in front of you saying, you know, slow down, residential street. It just, you know, it just kind of would just relax everybody just a little bit. And I know when I drive slow, I'm a lot more relaxed. And the faster I go, the more attention I have to pay, the more I have to look around, the more I have, you know, it's this escalating thing, whether I'm on a bike or whether I'm driving. So
selling the benefits of that relaxation is the issue here.
There is an opportunity to just put out signs too. I mean, people have done that. I think on your street, Annie, people put out what drive like your kids live here or something like that. And there could be other creative, maybe even less confrontational signs, you know, showing kids playing or something. And if you put those out at the entrance to your neighborhood streets and things, there's always that you know, doesn't take any city involvement. You can always put out a sign as long as it's less than a certain size on your parkway.
But to have a street work the way that we're talking about, you need to be able to put something in the street, and that does require the city's involvement.
Right.
So if the city would approve some specific streets that people could put those out, and then have some sort of setup where it is the you know, like it said, you've got ambassadors there that then take care of that as well. I think that could potentially work quite well.
I say, Bill, yeah, we did put up signs. All the neighbors bought signs. We put them all in their front yards, and it just really raised awareness. You know, we talked specifically to certain motor vehicle drivers about their behavior, and what really works though is having something in the middle of the street. I might have accidentally left a giant white trash can in the middle of the street to see what it would do. Giant orange cones work really well too. There was an orange cone put in the middle of the street here at Carl in Delaware when they were working on Florida. Cars were whipping down Delaware trying to shortcut around. And an orange cone went in the middle of that intersection, and suddenly cars were stopping, slowing, looking, because right where I live now, tons of pedestrians are crossing over onto Bliss Drive. So just even tiny little interventions, they just work. They work.
Other comments or questions?
I think a really important point is that this benefits the drivers as well as the pedestrians and other street users. They may not sense that it's benefiting them at first, and that's where some kind of hump needs to be, we need to get over that hump to get to the low entropy or whatever, that they begin to feel the benefit.
Okay. I don't know. Is there any direction from the commission about what you want to do with this? Do you want to just keep it on our agenda, or we do have a committee? I think it was Annie, Sue, and Nancy. Is that right? Do you guys want to meet over, in December and, talk about some ideas and maybe bring something back to us?
Yeah, I really like the format Cynthia presented for Vision Zero, like a 12-month plan. I think that's really smart to try to lay out like what we're trying to get done, what we're interested in doing. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. Doesn't mean it's realistic, but at least it gives us some goalposts. And I think that would really be a smart thing for us to put together, would be to meet and then come up with sort of some ideas and possibilities over the next 12 months of what we could make happen. I think that would be realistic and wonderful. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks. And I think, at some point, probably not in December, but January, February, you might want to meet with staff and talk about some ideas about some, experimental closures or something like that. If you're far enough along to suggest something, but not a specific street maybe, but just kind of in general, how that might work.
Yeah, I think it would be good if we were all on the same page about what it is, what's possible and what the benefits are. Like a play street gives you something, but like a shared street network gives you something else. How much political capital is the city willing to put out there for what kind of response? People like to see their tax dollars at work, frankly, and people really like these types of streets, and it really makes them feel like, wow, look, my city did this thing, and it's a brag point, and it makes them really happy. But I don't know if the city quite understands that at this point.
I think that the thing that I keep thinking about, though, is that you do need to get the buy-in from whatever neighborhood you're in, from the people who are living on the street and their access to it, and who actually would be using the streets. Would it, if we created this, would someone come and use it? I mean, I just, that's the part that I kind of stumble over.
Mm-hmm. You need the neighborhood to ask for it.
Right.
Yeah, you don't show up and say, oh, lucky you, we're going to turn your street into a play street. It doesn't work that way.
Right, and that's kind of the part that I keep stumbling over, so.
You need to ask.
Okay,
Yeah.
So as far as like open meeting acts, just remind people that the reason we have 3-person committees, if you have 4, you're violating the open meeting act, but that doesn't prevent you from shooting ideas to one of these 3 members.
Yeah, talk to us.
Yeah, so talk to them individually. We can't talk about it in a group larger than 3, but feel free to provide input to that group. So that's it for our action item, well, our discussion items on the agenda. No new business, no whatever was next, new business, old business.
Unfinished.
Unfinished, none of that. Well, we always have unfinished business, but nothing specific today. Announcements, I would say that I submitted letters on behalf of BPAC in support of 2 ITEP grants. One was the Park District grant on Broadway that Kara and the Park District applied for. That was, they already have the phase 1 and 2 engineering done for that. So I think it's just construction costs now. Hopefully that'll get funded. The other one is Baker's Lane, the guy from IDOT, I already forgot his name, Bob.
Nelson.
Yeah, Bob Nelson talked about, apparently he'd already seen it. That's good. So that's the east side of Weaver Park. The city owns a little bit of right of way along Scottswood neighborhood there. So Baker's Lane is that right of way. The path itself would probably utilize quite a bit of Weaver Park. So it would be another kind of cooperative thing with the Park District at some point, although they weren't the main sponsor of this application. This was a city application. So those 2 have been applied for. I don't think we usually we don't expect to find out about those till March or so, probably.
I have an announcement too when you're done.
Okay, the only other thing I wanted to mention was the police are going to be doing a little bit different traffic enforcement next year to try to address the disparity in traffic stops issue. As far as almost all the police departments stop more African-American people than white people, and Urbana's been looking at this for 10 or 20 years, and they finally decided to actually try something kind of radical, and that's only traffic stops where there's the most accidents. And so that kind of goes along with Vision Zero. It's data informed. So they're going to try not to enforce traffic unless it's a serious infraction in neighborhoods outside of the areas where they've identified traffic issues, accidents, basically. I did bring up that another part of Vision Zero is anticipating accidents and knowing where there are close calls and complaints and things like that. And Charisse, another council member, brought that up too. So I think they're still kind of looking at that, but I just want to let you know that there's going to be a little bit of change in traffic enforcement. So don't expect, if a police car doesn't stop somebody that makes a rolling right turn or something, that explains it. Other announcements, Cynthia?
Bill, I have a question.
Oh, okay, Deborah.
Are traffic cameras allowed within Urbana city limits?
No.
Is that a statewide thing or is it a local ordinance?
It's a statewide ban, yeah. There would have to be a state law passed in order for Urbana to implement traffic.
So I thought the state legislature was talking about banning red light cameras. Did they actually ban
Chicago has red light cameras. The only Chicagoland area has the legal authority to do that. Chicago often passes laws. They pass laws in the legislature that apply to Chicago because the downstate legislators won't go along.
Yeah.
But Urbana can't pass a local ordinance permitting traffic cameras because there just isn't that authority at city government level.
Nope.
No, it would require a change in state law. Even home rule, it's not allowed.
Seems like an easy way to get rid of racial disparities, if you ask me, is to have it done
Make it automatic.
But
it works. They're extraordinarily effective in the countries that use them. I will just say that. So, all right. So I'm going to share my
in
screen.
Chicago, let me tell you.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen and show you the group that put together our World Day of Remembrance. Did a, I can see, here we go. People for Safe Streets. We created a website. We created an organization called People for Safe Streets. So we now have a website that you can go and visit. Just call peopleforsafestreets.weebly.com. And so you could see I posted here information from our presentation that we did, also a link to the WCIA story and links to information on that. Then some of the data that we presented there in terms of what's going on and in our community and what Vision Zero is. And so we'll be adding more information here, and I just wanted to make you all aware of it. And you can see the video I showed tonight is posted here. We're going to be posting a little form that you can fill out about how you want to get involved in helping locally, if you want to work on Vision Zero, or if you want to work on, you know, rural roads or whatever. But that basically we're just a group that is working to reduce traffic violence through advocacy, support, and action locally. And I just wanted to make sure you all were aware of that and the work that's being done there.
Can that
Fantastic.
link be added to the minutes?
Sure.
That would be great.
Yeah, peopleforsafestreets.weebly.com, right? Okay. Any other announcements? Future topics, any new future topics, we can leave that on there. We definitely want to try to have some input on capital improvement plan. And
we can give an update in January on our Vision Zero work. Hopefully we'll know something about the class by then.
okay.
And we can give an update on Slow Street, Play Street, Open Street, Shared Street, whatever we're going to call ourselves, that committee.
Okay.
I'm curious how the wayfinding signs are coming along.
Yeah, we could ask about that maybe during the capital improvement presentation. I don't think there was funding included for that this year. That'll be a whole discussion, I think, how the funding works. That was one of the things with the ITEP grant, actually, that I wanted to keep discussing, because if we get that in March, it's not going to happen until probably the next fiscal year. But the way it was presented was that they would use half of the sidewalk maintenance fund to make our match for the Baker's Lane project, and I'd rather they didn't touch our sidewalk maintenance fund. So there's things like that that we could talk about when we talk about the capital improvement plan stuff.
I can add the bike wayfinding signage. It's a large cost, so it's going to take a while to make sure we have the funding.
It was going to be incremental.
I mean, we wouldn't do it all at once anyway, because you wouldn't want to have to replace 3 phases of signs every 10 years. It's just not feasible.
Yeah.
Craig did have money squirreled away, but whether or not it's still there, I am uncertain. It's something I'd had to look into, but I did do a cost estimate for the phase 1 signage last year, and it's going to come with some sticker shock. I will give you that. I can't divulge how much it is currently, because it may have changed since my last quote, but it is not a cheap project.
Okay. Any other future topics? Okay. If not, then we have no further business. And it's 8:59 and 28 seconds. So
Well, I just want to say, since we might not meet again, I hope everybody has a good holiday. Please stay safe. It's really rather frightening right now. So we want to see everybody back here in January.
Yeah.
Thank you, Urbana Park Districts, for holding the line here for us. You guys are being overrun. You are. I was in the park the other day. It was like 700% filled. I was like,
oh yeah. If you haven't been to Crystal Lake Park yet, go for a walk in Crystal Lake Park. It's amazing, the transfer.
Yeah, it's going to be wonderful.
Cool. Okay, great. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you
All right.
all.
Thanks, everybody.
Adjourned.
Thank you so much.
Everybody. Bye-bye.